and welcome to Lychee Basics Part 2. And for those of you that didn't catch Part 1, I will put a link to its video in the description below. But I highly recommend watching Part 1 before we go into Part 2, unless you don't care about supporting minis, because today we're going to support a full-size model. And when I say full-size, this is a very large-scale model. It's got a couple parts. All of them are very detailed. It's got some crazy hair textures to work with. So this is going to be a fun one, especially for those of you that are getting into models that are maybe not pre-supported and you need to be able to do all of this yourself. This is going to include hollowing, repair, and all kinds of other stuff. So let's get right into it. All right, and here we are back in Lychee Slicer for part 2 of the Lychee Basics episode. And today, as I said, we're going over a large figurine. Now, this is kind of like a half-quarter bust, I guess, whatever you want to call it. This is Alcina, otherwise known as Lady Dimitrescu from Resident Evil. This one has a slightly artistically portrayed posterior and a little bit more haughty than I think the character from the game. But hey, anyway, artistic, right? And it's all for educational purposes. So we're going to go over a couple different parts here that she's got. She's got an arm, she's got a head, she's got a body, and she's got a base. Now, one of the things I promised you guys is that we would talk about making, do with little printers. Now, this is the Mono 4K. This is an older printer. I still use a few of these. They're workhorses. They're great. They print great. They do wonderful with good resins. You just can't fit a lot on them. So, with this, obviously, we're not looking at, you're going to get that body on this plate. Probably not much else. So you're printing her by herself. There's no way around that. And I'm definitely going to hollow this body, so we're going to talk about that today too. Now, the base, it's not that big, but I would print it by itself anyway, just because of the fact that you don't want there to be any difficulties with any of the stuff, with the base. And if you print it solid, that's a decent amount of resin, so I would just leave it by itself. Give it at least a 45-degree angle on rotation. And again, this one kind of starts off, so put it down first, and then go ahead and give it, a tilt. So it's got a nice little rotation there. And that's probably a bit more than 45 degrees because it doesn't start it at its base line of, the build plate. That's probably about there. Now, if you're going to hollow this one, we'll go into hollowing in a bit. And then I'll go over supporting each part of this model, how I would go ahead and do it. Now, we've also got the head and we've got that claw. Now, they they're big. You're thinking, I don't really want to print one of these at a time. That seems like such a waste, right? Well, you don't have to. If you're clever about how you angle this hat and her head, because they are, together, and then we take this arm and let's say tilt it, pull it over here, tilt it. Now all of a sudden we got both parts and they're sitting on that plate. So this is just a show of orientation. You can play around with it and get your parts to sit right on any size printer. You can make it happen. Now I've made dozens of her, so I already know, my game plan for the most part when I'm attacking a print like this. These long claws are going to get the little tiny supports. Pretty much everything else is going to get thicker supports because this stuff is going to be hollow. Her body is definitely going to get hollowed, and so will the base because I don't like wasting resin on bases. So let's quickly cut into the hollowing part, and we'll talk about that as we kind of go along. So let's go over to our Prepare tab and click on Hollowing. And then we're going to go over to the Hollowing tab and load up my preset. Now, I use a thickness of a 1.7 millimeter. You can go all the way up to 2.5 reasonably, but 10 is just way too thick. So I advise sticking between 1.7 and 2. It's usually pretty good. Keep the quality level up because that'll make the inside smoother and easier to do your internal support work later when you're messing around. Plus, this has got some intricate patterns, and I'd like to just be able to, hollow this without any issues. So anyway, we'll go ahead and go to the hollowing. We'll click the Add Update button, and that's going to go ahead and remove the inside of the piece. We can see it's not that thick, but it's definitely thick enough. And, I'd rather just print the shell than print the whole thing. Now, see, but hollowing creates other issues. Like these little guys are now islands in the middle there. They kind of float. So we have to make sure that we add enough little tiny supports underneath here to be able to support those when they do get printed. But we'll get into that in just a sec. So now we need to add our holes. For something like this, go ahead and core out the entire bottom. I mean, like just punch it out as far as the program will let you take it. Now, in this case, I think it's being stubborn because, yeah, I've hit the edge. So let me go ahead and pull that up a little bit. And, oh, no. So in this case, this is as close as I can get it, which is fine. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the outside, go my exterior, and then I'm going to go inside. And I'm going to look at where the bottom is that I can't reach, and then I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this circle, I'm going to pull it up, and then I'm going to punch a couple holes at the bottom like that. So that creates my original vent, and now this giant hole becomes aeration. So let's go ahead and punch these holes out by selecting them and then clicking the hole only option. Now I'm also going to add some additional holes up here to decrease pressure on top and holes in the bottom there, and then repeat that. Now we have all the holes in the places we want them. Let's go ahead and move over to supporting this piece. We're going to select our raft, which I'm going to use the shape wall. I'm going to choose our type of style of supports, which in this case, I'm going to go with my sub-medium light, which is the 2.22 and a 1.10. Again, like I did with the minis, I'm going to go ahead and start with an automatic support setup. And some folks criticize me for this, and honestly, I don't care. All I'm doing is letting the computer decide where some of the most important supports need to be, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to clean it up. That's pretty much all that I'm doing. The auto support system is not perfect, nor will it ever be because it's a computer. I will always have a better eye than what the machine will for where the detail really needs to be because I know what I want. However, it's a great tool to speeding up your workflow, and for those that are beginning in the art and the using 3D printing, I highly recommend making as much use of it as possible. Don't ever push it past normal, though. You push it too hard, and these things just create absolute thick support tree trunk forest that you'll just never be able to get off. So anyway, once we've set the auto supports, we of course need to do our island check trick. So we need to make sure that we're set up on our lowest layer height possible first, which is 10 or 10 microns, or 0.01 millimeters, or a tenth of a millimeter. There's a lot of ways you can say it, okay? I check my proximity first to make sure that nothing's out of line. Then I'll do my support visibility to find that one support that's out of whack. I'll either delete it or move it to fix the proximity error, and then I carry on. Now, in this particular case, these parts aren't super huge. This is only about 56 millimeters tall, so the island searches shouldn't take too long, but I might spare you the torture of it by speeding some of this footage up. We'll just see how long this takes in general, and I do want to get through supporting each part of this particular model. All right, so I went ahead and did a lot of the island searching off edit for you guys because that's just boring loading bars. Anyway, we finished doing the island searching for the base, the arm, the head, all that's done. So those are ready for us to go back and finish our supporting once we go ahead and hollow out the body. Now, I wanted to show you all this because we haven't gone over a body yet. Body's a little bit more intricate when it comes to hollowing. So let's go ahead and go back to the hollowing section. We'll go back to our hollowing 3D. Choose our preset, and again, we're going to update that. And we're going to, again, we need to put holes in this. We're not going to punch a giant hole in it like we did with the base, though. So we're going to put a hole in the neck, and the hole in the neck is really for air, because it's going to be the last hole that gets created. It's not as important, but it's for air. When you go to clean this later, you want to have an upper hole and a lower hole to make sure that air can escape while you're trying to fill it up with alcohol to clean it. You're going to want to put holes in the arm socket there, in the feet keys that are going to click into the base. And again, since we've got this room down here, and this is a decent amount of space we're playing with, we can go ahead and add a decent number of holes towards the bottom here to prevent any high levels of suction or peel force. So let's go ahead and add those holes. And we just create like a vent, essentially. So it gives you a nice section of holes there. We can also create some holes in the keys for venting at the top and resin at the back. Remember, you always want to make sure you have an air hole and a fluid hole. That'll make sure that you never get a clog and that you don't get unnecessarily peel force when you suction when you're trying to do things. So there we go. Once you got your holes cut, go ahead and pop your holes out. Same way we did with the base. Make sure you didn't cut into any material. And then we'll have a lot less material to support when we work with this. And otherwise, this is going to be a great, easy print. Now, she stands at about 144 millimeters tall or 14.4 centimeters, so she's a decent height. But remember, she's missing her legs. This isn't a full piece, it's just a bust. Almost a three-quarter bust, but it's a bust. Regardless, it's a pretty decently sized piece, and I think for large figurines, it's a nice place to start. Anyway, we'll go ahead and start supporting this one again by creating our raft. Shape wall is usually my preferred, and then we're going to add the sub-mediums for this one as support as well. And again, I'm going to use the auto to generate my supports first. And this will give us an idea of what we need to do as we go through and finish the actual supporting. There we go. Now I don't ever have it create bracings on start, and this one has the grid turned on, so we should be good when we go back to implement. But I'm going to show you guys a cool secret since this has a flat bottom on a nice way to finish off the supports down here. So if we go over to manual and scroll to the bottom, we have our support projection like we used with the base. Now, most people wouldn't think of doing this, but I'm crazy and I love to speed up my workflows as much as possible. So I use the support projection on the bottom, and then I will go like this. I'm going to up the interval a little bit because I've already got a few supports down there, and then I'm going to add them. And there we go. The bottom of this model is pretty much supported. What did that take me? About a minute. Now, the one thing we're going to want to check down here is to make sure that we are covering our islands. We did catch a few there already, even though I didn't finish that island search. And we'll go ahead and just put a nice line of supports there where the bottom starts. And since this is going to touch the base, this doesn't really matter down here too much. We just want to make sure, just like the feet on that mini in part one, that we take care of the perimeter. The perimeter is the most important part. You support that, the middle of it will most likely be fine, as long as you put a couple supports there to support it. We're going to add some supports on the arm here. I'm going to use the support painter by clicking, holding, and then dragging, which will allow me to paint supports in a row. You can use this on all sorts of surfaces. It's very handy. Up here, we're going to do the same thing. And then over here as well. I'll go over to the front, make sure we don't have any island areas near the chest. Flower. And then the last thing we're going to do, obviously, is we're going to do island searches on this one and check our proximity. So we have a couple of supports that aren't lining up. We'll get rid of those. And then we'll go ahead and do the island searches. And I'll come right back and we'll finish the rest of the model. All right, so did our islands, took care of all that. Now we're looking at the rest of the model, which is done. Now, the only other thing I want to advise is just to make sure that check your starting points on your prints. Always make sure that is going to be the most secured area, because where the print starts is going to be where all of your sagginess might happen when the original stuff, when the first couple layers start to print. Because when you have these very thin layers, whether they're 50 microns, 20, 35, whatever, you're always going to have this issue of the really thin print layers in resin. They get floppy. This is what happens. We have pancakes. Essentially, the stuff gets floppy and it folds over. So when it gets pressed down again to print, part of it kind of gets compressed. And so you lose some of that detail because it gets squished. We call this pancaking. The pancaking effect is horrible. Whenever you see that, that means an area you missed a part of a perimeter somewhere. So I always advise check your corners, check your perimeter, check your circles, ovals, anything like that. Check your shapes and make sure that you've outlined your perimeter as much as possible without being too heavy. Don't go crazy. Sometimes my stuff looks crazy, but I'm using very small support tips anyway. So not going to really be much of an issue when it comes down to it. Now, when you're done with all that, again, make sure your proximity is clean. You got 0 on that. Head over to your structure tab and make sure to set your bracings. You don't want to leave just these little stringy bars hanging around. You want this bracing set up in there or something like it to make sure that this support is going to be good and it's going to survive that printing process. Now, this is a long print. This is going to be probably about 8 hours or so, maybe more. Um, but we'll go ahead and slice this one just to give you guys an idea. Again, I'm going to go smooth surfaces. I'm not going to turn either of those on. And I'll do the fast because why not? Let's go ahead and pop that out. And again, we don't see the image of the slicing until it finishes this part. This is one of the reasons why it is a bit faster. I think because while it's processing, you're not having to see the actual slicing going on. And there we go. There's the slice. Okay, that's a 9-hour print. We'll go ahead and pop that one away. All right, so here's we are back with the base. Let's go ahead and finish this up by doing some support projection. And we're just going to select the surfaces that are showing the bottom. Preview, add, and bang. Pretty good. I really love this. The support projection tool, my best friend. Right on top of the island search tool because I don't have to worry about all those little flowers right there. Because I know that those islands got caught. We are good. See, look at this. Island caught. Now, maybe you want to add an extra one here? Sure. Go ahead and add a couple extra points there on some of those islands. That might be appropriate. I did not actually, I did say this when we were working on the mini, that sometimes the islands need more than one support to make sure that they do survive. So go ahead and do that where the areas are, facing down with objects like this, flowers, whatever, those types of designs. Definitely want to make sure that you get your perimeter supported all the way up to at least 3/4 of the front to about here. And this should be pretty good. So again, we'll go ahead. Now we've already done the islands here. I'm going to go ahead and check my proximity. Looks like we got some stuff that's not in sync here. So we'll go ahead and take a look. And, okay. I want to fix some of these rather than just delete them. Now again, you can press the spacebar at any time to go in advanced support mode, which will allow you to edit, pull, push and drag different aspects of the supports to manipulate them, essentially to fix them in cases like this. These are mini supports that are in error. So let's see. We got, there's one. Unfortunately, you can't really move those very well. So I'm just going to delete it. And I think, is that it? Nope. Still says there's one. Oh, there's the other one on the other side. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. And I'll go ahead and bring the supports back in. And then we're going to do our structure, and we're going to go back to the bracings and make sure we set up the bracing cage on the bottom here. It's going to make this really, really tough while it's printing. And we'll go ahead and slice this and get it out of here. Again, I'm going to go with my smooth surfaces, same settings. I tend to use this for a lot of stuff. So go ahead and slice this one, get it on out. Again, if you're not familiar with the fast slicing option, it works really great. It's a lot faster. I don't know if it's 10 times faster in every case, but it is definitely a lot faster than traditional slicing. So if you're impatient like me and you don't want to wait. Now the last couple parts we have is the head and the claw. Now I've already done a large majority of this, but we're going to go back in here with support painter, and we're going to paint in some very light supports in our 15 range, the small ones. And we're going to fill in some of these blank areas. I know this looks heavy, but trust me, these will pop right off. These will not cause any damage. These are very light supports. And again, I'm going to do this as well on the rim of her hat, but I'm not going to use the super light. I'm going to use the light. And again, we want to make sure that the starting point of her hat gets caught. And then I'm going to go ahead and go up the perimeter of the hat there, and then up the other side. And then we're going to take this from a circular point and draw. And again, this looks like a lot of support. Oh, a little glitch support there. If that ever happens, just delete them. And we see, that looks like a lot, but what you're looking at is a lot of tips. Again, only 0.20, so very light. And then we have a decent number of bars, but they're very thin. So we're going to just fill in a little bit more area down here using the support painter. And then just make sure you have a couple supports on the bottom of her chin. And she should be good to go. I'm going to fill in a couple of the yellow zones here on the back of the hand, which, by the way, if anybody's curious, the yellow zones are the parts that you want to focus on. Those are the parts that are going to have the highest degree of pressure. So they're going to be the ones that are going to try and fight back. So that's where you want to make sure that your supports are supporting those areas as best as possible. And I like to use the support painter because it's quick and it allows me to paint on supports quite easily. Don't mind me there. I like knocking my microphone away. It's part of what I do. You can tell the only time I have to work on these episodes is very late in the wee hours. And my house is not quiet enough usually for me to do this. I appreciate your patience. Anyway, once we clean up the proximity warnings, check our islands to make sure we didn't lose anything. And then I'm going to check this arm here to make sure that it has a good starting contact, which I think it has 2 supports here. Let's go ahead and add a couple more. Get that elbow supported. And then I'm just going to add a couple more supports in the middle of the arm just to make sure that it doesn't have any problems creating those first couple of layers there. The claws are definitely good. I'm not even sure I want to. I'm going to put bracings on it, but they're going to be very light. So again, we're going to go to my very light. We're going to go to my bracings, and I'm going to go to my minis. I'm going to edit this. I'm actually going to take this down to a 0.4. I'm going to apply that. And they're going to be very, 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 very light bracings, but they're there, and they will help stabilize those supports. For this head, though, I'm going to just go back to my standard and I'm going to apply that. And those are now good to go. So let's go ahead and get those sliced. Again, I'm going to use the same aliasing and I'm going to pop those out. This is going to be, call this one face claw. And we'll go ahead and slice this up. And I know it looks like a lot of supports, but you have to remember a lot of that grid stuff, it's all just reinforcement. The grid lattice stuff is really to help the structure build. So if it has like a partial failure or one of the supports pulls away, sometimes you'll have the rest of it will kind of make up for that. So there's a lot of benefit to using the grid system. And I've been putting it into my workflows professionally now for a bit. And I will definitely say it has its advantages for sure. So does the support painter as well as the support projection system. Both of those save me so much time and effort when it comes to doing supporting. So there's the parts. They're all ready. As I've shown you, you can fit quite a bit onto a small printer, even when they look like big parts. You don't have to worry about that. Some people are like, oh, I need to get a giant printer. No, I mean, this is a 14 centimeter tall model. I mean, this is big. I don't, you don't need a giant printer for this. Everything fits on this. You can do this in three prints. You print her, then you print the base, then you print these two parts, and you're done. And you have a finished model. That'll take you maybe, 2 days at most of you dealing with prints. That's a really great thing. So if you expand from that, you start to learn a little bit more. Once you play around with models like this, you'll figure out this is not so hard. It's not so difficult. A lot of folks stumble in the beginning when they first start using 3D printing, especially resin. And resin, I know, is always touted as being very difficult. And I've heard so many folks at shows, at cons that we've gone to, trade shows, art shows, whatever, tons of places where I've sold my stuff. People will tell me it's one of their biggest disconnects is they get so frustrated and flustered with the process of trying to figure out how it works, learning process, etc. And I'll often try to offer them some quick advice, but honestly, there is no short and quick advice. I think what it is it's a matter of you need to learn the tools, learn the software, learn how to understand how to interpret the different types of resins. You've got your different types and brands, but they have their different thickness. Thicker resins are going to need more time with the light off delay. Thinner resins aren't. But I'd still recommend probably trying to slow your cure times down a little bit instead of speeding them up because this is going to lead to more success and less failure. Oftentimes, we're trying to print so fast that we forget that really isn't quality more important than speed, but the companies seem to think that speed's important as well because they keep releasing newer and newer models and types of resin that can print even faster and faster. Honestly, I would rather go slower and have a better product at the end of the day than deal with more failures because I'm trying to print faster. And honestly, it doesn't even make sense when you think about it sometimes if you wind up with tons of failures. And I have seen this time and time again where people will pick up resin, they'll try it, failures will happen, and then they will just instantly give up and quit. And hopefully these kinds of videos will help and some folks will find it and find that maybe, hey, you know what? This isn't so bad. I can figure it out. Using a combination of the auto support system, the tools that Lychee has, the island searching, the hollowing, hole punching system, all of that, including the grid and everything else that they've introduced with their newer support. And I know some of these features are pro features, but honestly, guys, $5-6 a month, it's not really that big of a deal if it's just you using it. I get it. Maybe you don't have it, but still, if you can't afford that much for the Pro Edition, it's really awesome. And no, again, I don't get paid for this, but I can't stress more than enough that it is, if you are going to do this for a hobby or even more than a hobby, you really should use those improved tools that the Pro version offers because it really will make a big difference. Anyway, I hope this episode was good for all of you. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching me support both of these models in part one and part two. I do plan on doing some more episodes like these where we might split it up a little bit more only because of the fact that they do tend to take a while, especially from doing a big model. It can take hours upon hours, especially if it's a few dozen parts, which some of them can actually tend to be. But if you want to see more stuff like this, please drop your comments. Let me know what y'all think. Again, I'm going to put the link to part 1 in the description as well, so you'll have some more insight as to some of the things I didn't really fully explain in this episode. So anyway, see y'all again soon. Bye.